You really should basically disillusion yourself into believing you can't fail.
We all have dreams of releasing the next big indie hit, but what if our belief in those dreams and being a little delusional that it might actually happen could be one of our biggest strengths?
Full self-confidence and belief into it, because that's what's going to create something much better than if you just go in with a half foot in, half foot out. I think that's been a big part of my problem in the last couple of years is I'm half foot in, half foot out with these prototypes, and I just don't dive all the way in.
Tim Beaudet is a game dev who has been living the dream of making his own games full-time for the last 5 years.
The original Eggelerate got me $6,250. The franchise in total has made just under $9,000.
Tim is yet to release that viral game, but he has not been financially dependent on the individual success of any one game, and he's here to tell us how he was able to make this happen and stay full-time with moderate financial success.
Understands the risk involved with going full-time. I think I actually did very well with that myself. I'm also kind of feeling like small games are possibly shooting myself in the foot. It was never going to give me the money back, so...
And what about for a game dev that they've been hobbying for a while, they know how to make stuff? What advice would you give that developer?
The first and foremost advice would be...
So Tim, I actually saw your YouTube channel several years ago when I was first getting into game dev. And the first video that popped into my mind when you were recommended as a guest was a video about Eggelerate. So I'd love to start by talking about some of your games and Eggelerate in particular. So what's the elevator pitch for that game?
Basically, you are driving a car around obstacle courses, but you're carrying an egg on top inside of a bowl. And it's very easy for the egg to fall out. So it's actually quite a challenging game. Has a cute art style, looks kind of fun and goofy, but it's really got you on the difficulty curve.
Yeah, the art style still stands out to me to this day. Like it's a game that really sticks in your mind. Would you say that it's like a rage game before that topic kind of became popular, or that's how things were designed, or even back then, was it maybe considered a rage game? How did you think about it?
So initially when I was developing Eggelerate, it started from Ludum Dare. I did a game jam and made it in, I think it was Ludum Dare 46, Keep It Alive was the theme. And basically, we were just trying to keep the egg alive. And it wound up kind of hard in the jam, but I got 12th in fun. And I was like, this game has something going for it. So I'd like to see if making it into something bigger would be better, if I could go somewhere. And my actual design for the game was like, let's make this more casual and easy and just fun and go like happy-go-lucky, which is kind of where the art style sort of stems from. The problem is keeping an egg inside that bowl is just so difficult that that's what the game wanted. And eventually, after fighting it enough, I was kind of like, well, if the game wants to be difficult, we should lean into that. And that's going to become who the game is for, like somebody that enjoys a difficult game. I think Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It was already out at that point, and of course Dark Souls was a thing. So it quickly became known as the Dark Souls of racing games, and I think that tag actually kind of fits pretty well.
Yeah, very cool. And you mentioned it was a game jam game, which is always interesting how those start and kind of become full-fledged projects. How long did you end up working on the project?
So obviously the 48 hours for the game jam originally. And then I wound up spending, I think it was 3 weeks to create, I want to say 10 levels and put it up on itch.io, just kind of as a prototype and see what's going on with that. And in the process of creating the itch.io prototype, I was like, this would be perfect for Easter if I put it on Steam. And so I waited about half a year until January, thinking it was only going to take me a couple months to whip out some more levels. And of course, naturally, the bar of quality that you want just keeps going up and up as you keep making a game. So it took me, I think, 2 full months of development and then a month of marketing for the Steam release.
Yeah, very cool. And I know it was several years ago, but when you look back on that time, was it one of those games that just sort of designed itself because you had such a strong core mechanic? Or were there any challenges that you came across in level building or how to make the game fun? Or what was kind of the experience of making that game?
So I am a programmer first. I love games and I love the design of games, but I don't have a lot of experience with designing levels or designing fun, if you will. So when I was building the levels for Accelerate, I could tell when something was working, but I couldn't really tell why or how to replicate it in another one. So it was basically like, let's make a whole bunch of levels, test them all out, see which ones work and which ones don't. And then the ones that are kind of got the right feel, I called it flow. Like you can feel the flow going through the track. And if that was there, this level had something that it could continue with. Whereas other levels are just like, yeah, you can do it, but it's just too slow or too twisty or too there was something that was keeping it from feeling right. And so that was a big challenge for me is trying to figure out what felt right for each level and then also kind of keeping them a bit unique and keeping the challenges moving.
Yeah, so you went with this kind of guess and check system, it sounds like, for Accelerate for this flow, which sounds like, not the worst way to do it. Like, I remember even an old Jonas Tyroller video where he talked about doing that for his art with, I think it was Will You Snail, and he just made a bunch of stuff and then decided what he liked later. So there's nothing wrong with that. Have you evolved as a game designer in that sense for fun, or do you still kind of use that, just build stuff and then cut out what doesn't feel right later?
I'm definitely evolving. I am getting better with what is going to be necessary. Like I'm getting better with my guesses, but it is definitely still a let's make a few things and figure out which way it's pulling me.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, something else you mentioned that I was kind of curious about just as your journey was that you put Accelerate on both itch and Steam. And normally, when I'm doing research for a guest, I like to go to their Steam page first and just see what commercial games they've launched. But Accelerate was the only game that I saw, but I know you've been developing since those 4 or 5 years ago since that game launched. So, are you just launching on other projects? And what have you been working on for the past couple years?
So Accelerate came out with the whole there was Accelerate the North Pole and Accelerate the Tropics. There was three of them that came out year after year after year. And Accelerate the Tropics actually kind of hit me pretty hard. It was a little I hired out more art than I had previously to try making it look better. I hired out more help in other ways. I tried making sure I didn't miss any beats on marketing because I really felt from the original one that I had something there, but I just wasn't quite getting the whole getting the whole pot that it deserved, I guess. But Tropics sort of fell flat on its face, even with all of the attempts and everything. And I guess it was just the original one had magic, and the other two are kind of like these off sprouts that didn't quite either resonate with the audience the same way. They don't really feel as Eastery as the original one did in hindsight. But effectively, with the release of Tropics, I've been stuck in this mode where I'm trying to find something that an audience is going to really love that I also want to build, and I have a real hard time answering the question of what does an audience want. So every time I start creating a new prototype or coming up with another idea, I sort of wind up in this like, why does anybody want this other than me? Why does somebody else want this? And it's almost a prison cell of a place to be as a creator because I do have a lot of things I want to create, but I can't answer why anybody else, like why an audience would come and gather to come play this or why they would want to go buy it. And that's been a real challenge to get over. But I have been building other things. I've been working on a 100-day game as of recently. It's an incremental game and it's called Rush-cremental, which I'm on day 92 of 100. These are days of development. I'm not counting marketing or the initial planning of it, but I'm basically trying to. I was motivated by the trend in incremental games on Steam, and I wanted to bring my own feels to it, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Several little threads here that I would love to pull on. First, I want to back up just a little bit to this idea of audience and this kind of journey that you've been on, because I feel like a lot of game devs are in this boat. And I wonder if for you, is it just because it's hard to identify something popular, or is it that that is in tension with what you want to make as well? So which does that spark anything for you when I asked that question that way? Did that make sense?
Yeah, so it's definitely what is going to be popular, and by popular here, I don't mean going super viral and having millions of people playing the game. I'm meaning like popular enough that it's going to fund my time building the game. Get like 10,000 people playing a $10 game or something would be a perfectly popular enough thing for me to chase. Um, but I do agree that this is a very hard thing as a developer, is finding something that people are going to want while also crossing with what you want to make.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so then let's go ahead and jump into that 100-day game. Do you feel like you've found something with this game that an audience will resonate with? Has that been a part of your thinking for this one?
So with the incremental, that is purely from a market research standpoint. That is the hot genre on Steam right now. It's not a genre that I would personally say I would jump in and play myself, but I did go do a lot of, like, I played Keep on Mining, I played Leica, I, I got a whole bunch of the games and I went playing them and trying to figure out what overall is in behind this genre and what makes them tick, I guess. Um, I think part of the problem with me and finding an audience, including whether it's incremental or racing or not, um, is I'll buy games and play them, but I think I'm too developer oriented that when I'm playing a game, it's because I want to learn about the decisions the developers made and why is it like this. I'm not necessarily buying and playing the games because they're fun. I mean, I do
Right.
play games for fun, but
Right.
it's rare. I don't think I've ever really, in the last 10 years, I don't think I've gone and said, "Oh, I got to go play this game because it's fun." And I wish that were different in my brain, but it's who I am, and I think it's a weakness as far as trying to find out what does a player want.
Yeah, I the funny thing for me that's like a little bit like that for me is I did business school, and now when I watch a movie, I can't help but see all the product placement. And so like my wife gets super annoyed sometimes because we're like Coca-Cola, Mercedes-Benz, like sometimes I just let her enjoy, but I still see it. But yeah, you almost can't unsee like what
Yeah.
they're doing and all these things. So I totally resonate with that. After this journey of playing all these incremental games, did you have any takeaways of what you feel like the genre is trying to do?
Definitely. I felt what I was getting, like what most of those games were speaking to me and resonating with me as a person was, they allow you to jump into this relaxed state where you're going to progress regardless of making good or bad decisions. Like you can't hurt yourself too bad in them. You might slow down the game, but that's not really like there might be some people out there that do play for like see how fast I can get the number to go up and uh, go as fast as you can. But there's also, I think, for the majority of players, it's just about being able to shut off your mind, entering this Zen, relaxed state of you are doing something, but it's not, it's letting your mind do whatever your mind wants to do. It almost puts me into a sleepy daisy state, which I've got to say, when I'm playing my own game and it's doing that same thing, I'm like, yes, I nailed it. But it's also kind of like, I'm not done with a day's work yet. I can't be in this state right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And something that this is sparking for me, I haven't heard anyone describe it quite like that, is that maybe a piece of the appeal of this too is that it's almost the opposite of like scrolling or like a TikTok feed, in that
Yep.
is just like constant dopamine. And there is dopamine hits and sort of cycles that you can talk about. But yeah, it is much more of I've played a couple myself. I wouldn't call myself like an incremental gamer, but I've tried a few and enjoyed them. But yeah, it's a very different sort of dopamine hit than like scrolling. So maybe this is a little bit the antithesis of that. that, like being able to just stay in one place. So anyway, that's just something that sparked for me there. So you say you're hitting that in this game that you're doing. Any tips or any intentional things that you've been able to do that help you foster that feeling of sort of flow and zen?
My intention on it is basically making sure that all the choices the player has at a given time, if they like when I've been designing the tech tree and whatever for your upgrades and everything, I'm trying to design it in such a way that if the player tried to take the least optimal path, it's not so punishing that if they also took the optimal path, it's like a 20-minute difference in playtime rather than hours. Um, and so that's been one of the big things that I've done intentionally that's actually taken a lot of time in balancing this tree is like, well, if you go for the obvious good upgrade, that's going to go quick, but if you go for the slow upgrades first, how long does it take you to get back there? Um, yeah, it's been kind of interesting trying to solve that, and I would knowing what I know now, I would probably have built a tool to automate the playing and say, this is how far spread the points are at any given
Mm,
point in time.
sure.
Um, but that's not where I was when I when I started. It was a 100-day project. You know what I mean? Like 100-day project, you got to make choices quickly and go.
Right. Yeah, and then with that skill tree trying to solve for the players choosing the worst route, do you also try to balance at all for uh maybe just like the decisions feeling like they matter and have weight, or is it just a little bit more that this is the kind of game where you'd rather just pull up the low end versus have them feel like it's a really meaningful decision? Any thoughts on that for you for this game?
Yeah, there's so I went with an active incremental game, which is fairly close to what keep on mining is. Basically, it just means that the player's actually doing something every run. It's not just watch the numbers go up and wait. Incrementatives are definitely another branch of it, and I just wanted to go with active because it gives the player something to do in that relaxed state. And the way I've approached the upgrade tree for the most part is I'll play the active thing and be like, what do I want right now as a player? Like, what's holding me up at this moment? And so I'll push in that direction. Then, of course, if you push in one direction, now something else is holding you up. And of course, you still want to give the player some choices. So you want to sprinkle in some things that maybe they could use, but not as like important for them to get right now type of thing. Um, that's basically how I've approached the upgrade tree is just playing it and then figuring out what is the direction the player would want to go in right now and give them those upgrades.
Yeah, and then can you remind me, I think you said at the beginning, but I got distracted by some other topic. What are you doing in the game? Like what's the theme or the skin around the incremental?
So basically, you're in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and you're going around collecting scrap from cars and other things in the world. Mostly, it's cars and other vehicles. You're basically searching parts, ripping them open, and then they drop scrap. They drop different types of scrap depending on how far into the game you are, but you collect that scrap, and then you go to the upgrade tree. It lets you buy some stuff, and you get like I think it's 15 seconds for each run to go collect the scrap, and it's almost like a hide and seek type thing. You have a fog of war that you actually have to search for, and so at the beginning of the game, it's like really hard to search through that fog. But as you progress, it gets a little easier and easier, and your parts come off a little faster or whatnot, and things get more valuable.
Yeah, and then on Twitch, you're still labeled as a racing game developer. So are you driving the car around in the fog? Is this how we got here? It's almost like racing adjacent, or is this like not a driving a car game?
There is a bit of racing to it. So I wanted this post-apocalyptic world because it also has like a Mad Max vibe to it, and to go from one territory to the next. There's 5 territories in the game, but to go from one to the next, you basically have to do some drag races. And so you're collecting these scraps to build up a little race car to then go Mad Max racing through this post-apocalyptic world. And it's just a little mini game, and I've actually come back to that thing has been a pain to make. Like, you would think me being the racing dev, that would be the easy bit, and I thought that too going into this. I think I've spent more than 10 days of the 100 days on that one little piece, and it's the smallest side piece of this game. It's like,
Oh, no.
at one point, I was like, "Okay, this is what it is. It's not gonna hit the things that were important to me. I've gotta give up on what's important to me in this and just let it be a side thing, because that's what it is in the game. It's just a little side that lets you transition from territory to territory." Um, but it was important when to developing it that it had something with racing to tie back to my own overarching goals with stuff, as well as, it just felt right being Mad Maxy. It felt like it fit the post-apocalyptic scrapyard.
Yeah, okay, this is all making sense. It's coming together of how we got from Eggelerate
Yeah.
to the 100-day game challenge in this Mad Max world. And yeah, one thing I was really curious to ask you about as you kind of label yourself as a racing game dev, you've sort of picked this lane for your brand and for what you're building, as you've kind of alluded to. So yeah, I did want to ask you some questions about racing games. So just in general, why pick that genre? Why is that something you're drawn to?
Oh, I wish I could pick a different genre. Um, I don't really know where the passion for racing comes from. There's something in the physics of it for sure. I like the deep physics of how the tires interact with the ground. And um, a long time ago, I read a physics paper and kind of was like how racing a car at the limit is like basically a ballerina dancing on a floor, except you're using a car and
Oh,
tires to
interesting.
do it. And it's very real when you're actually driving at the limit. That's what you're doing is you're transferring the weight of the car to different corners to give one wheel more traction than another. And I think that's where the passion really starts stemming from. But I also just enjoy programming and game development. So it's not like I really need to force myself to be racing. The reason why I stay with that passion, not only because it's there as like a core thing, I think as an indie developer, it's really good to have a focus. And I felt like that'd be the best thing for me to focus on because of that passion was already sitting there. And um, kind of in the hindsight of it, I'm looking at how the market is, and it's like, how do I make a racing game that people racing games are at the bottom of the list. I don't know if anyone's seen the market research for this or not, but it's like side scrollers, racing games, puzzle games, and then you go way, way up into incremental games and roguelites are way up at the top right now. And it's like I've chosen the hardest genre to be my lane, and here we are.
Yeah, I won't argue with you on choosing a hard genre, but it is really interesting just the concept of choosing a lane or a genre to stick with. And I think that's something a lot of indie devs have a hard time with. You know, they'll have even successful ones will have a very successful project, but then they'll pivot to something completely different. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like if you're thinking about a business, you're leaving behind a lot of learning that you've done. And so I do see a lot of benefits to choosing this route where you did, where you pick a lane and then you try to at least be, like you're doing an incremental game. So you're finding ways to adapt to the market and stuff. But I think that's something more devs should consider. But I guess a lot of people don't get to the point where they've released a super successful game. So it makes a lot of sense to just keep learning. But okay, very interesting. And then sticking with this idea of the racing genre, what would you say are like the key pillars that make a good racing game? With that genre, what are people looking for?
I think that can twist depending on the game, but I think one of the big feels is how the car feels. It can't be too stiff, but you've also got to feel like you're in control. Um, and I think there's a lot of like there's a wide range between how that works for an arcade game versus a sim racing game versus somewhere in the middle. Like there's definitely a lot of takes on how the physics will work. Um, I would say I'm having some troubles in identifying what the audience would go for in just a pure racing game. Like, I've played so many different games, and it's like, I played some good ones, and I don't really see myself being like, "Why would I want to go back and play it?" And I don't know if that's just a me being a developer, the developer first problem that I mentioned earlier, where I don't necessarily tackle playing games just for fun as I wish I did. Um, or if it's a problem that players have with the current state of racing games too. But I know that I've played a lot of racing games in the last 5 years, and here I'm meaning more indie racing games. That it's like it's a good playthrough, a good session for an hour or 2 hours, but why would I come back to it? And just having the campaign mode, which is very common for racing games, I don't think that's enough. At least it hasn't been enough of a hook for me to be like, I must go get this. And that applies to my own games. That's not just for the ones I played. That's just the genre in total. I don't know. There's definitely something with speed. A good one will give you the appeal of speed. I can see that, but that goes back kind of to the physics, and you go a bunch of different ways because Accelerate doesn't have actual speed, but it is challenging to drive smoothly enough that that egg doesn't just fly out of the bowl.
Yeah, have you found any racing games that had a good enough hook that you did feel yourself wanting to come into it that you've kind of been chasing, or is it really just a problem across all the games you played that it's hard to have that kind of stickiness?
For me, it seems to be a problem of the stickiness for any game. Um, I would say for like sim level, I am a sim racer, so I do tend to return to iRacing or whatever sim I'm playing, which is typically iRacing. Um, but I'll return to that for the competitive nature of it. Uh, but it's and and I would say sim racing or sim racers, the actual audience, and I fall directly into this one. I can actually answer a lot of questions about how that audience works. They tend to be, this is my sim and this is what I do. They don't tend to branch out and be like, I'm going to play this one too and that one as well, um, which could kind of hurt on trying to make a racing sim, which is my actual dream project. But I've set that off on the shelves because it's too big. Um, yeah, racing is a really hard genre too. And again, I don't know if that's just a me. I've been trying to figure out if I can answer this question as to why does a player want to continue with a racing game once they've set it down after a session. That would be a really awesome answer to have.
Yeah, well, we've seen the graphs from Chris Zukowski, so clearly nobody has broadly solved the racing genre. So I don't think it's just you.
Yeah,
And it's also a weird one, I imagine, where you're competing with some really monster AAA games that probably dominate the space. Like, I haven't heard of the indie version of Balatro for racing. Like, I can't think of that indie racing game, and maybe it exists, and I'm just not the target market. But just in general, it seems like a tough genre to challenge or to jump, a challenging genre to jump into.
definitely.
Kind of last comment on this sort of racing genre. So you've mentioned that you've played a bunch of racing games and played a bunch of incremental games. Are there any standouts that are influencing this 100-day game challenge? Like, are there any games you're really pulling a lot from?
It was pulling a lot from like Keep on Mining, the Mad Max world, basically. Um, Leica and a um, handful of other incrementals. Those are the ones that come into my mind far as the ones I played that I really pulled pieces from. I know that there were some upgrade decisions that I had from a bunch of random ones that I was like, this is a pretty good decision. Took note on it, and um, I don't know. So a bunch of them. I would say Keep on Mining and Mad Max World is the high inspirations for it. I wanted it to be active so that the player was actually doing something that was kind of important for me in building it.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. So, sort of transitioning the conversation a little bit, as I mentioned, I found your channel a couple years ago. I wouldn't even say several, but maybe 2020 or so, around that era. And so you've been teaching people tips about and sharing your journey for several years now with game dev. So I'm curious to kind of get your take on the landscape. So when you look around and you've been giving people advice for several years, do you think now is an easier time to become a game dev, or is it harder? And let's say, for the sake of this question, to become a full-time game dev, is it easier or harder now than it was 5 years ago?
That's a hard one because I actually became a full-time game dev 5 years ago. So is it easier or harder than when I first became a full-time game dev? Um, there's ways where it's harder, I think, but I also think it's been getting easier and easier with the number of tools available, and information is out there that in a way that is like I don't know, 'cause I'm already got through the basics. So it might be that I can just see, okay, there's so much information, how can you go astray? But at the same point, it might be one of those things where there's so much information, it's like, what do I actually use? What information do I trust? Um, and I think overall it's either the same or getting easier. I don't know if making money from it is getting easier, which is the context of the question and being full time. Um, and I think that just comes down to market. And I don't think there's definitely been a lot of people that have tried convincing me that the marketing and finding your audience is more a skill than it is about luck. And there was a point in time in my career, especially when I first went full time, I was believing that it was more skill, and I just needed to keep building my own skills there. Within the last, I don't know, probably 3 months, while building this 100-day game called Rush-cremental, I'm building it for a target audience. I've done the research for it. I've played lots of incrementals. I know what I'm building and who I'm building it for. I don't know if I'm seeing the traction from wish lists and trying to share it and all this other stuff. So I don't really think it's just, I don't think there's a recipe. I don't think there's anybody can really say this is going to go well or this is not going to go well. And so I, I don't think it's that easy, I guess, but I don't think it's ever been easy. I don't think that's ever existed. I think it's easy to look back and be like, oh, that was the golden era of indie games. Yeah, there were successes, but there was also so many failures we didn't hear about at that point too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So this experience of building Rush-cremental has sort of shifted your mindset to believe it's more about luck. That's really interesting. Specifically with marketing, do you feel, and so then I guess, do you feel that just success in general financially ultimately comes down to luck then, or how does skill in building the game even come into play for you in that kind of thought experiment?
Yeah, I definitely think there's skill is necessary. I don't think it's none skill, right? But it's but I think there's lots of pieces in luck in first of all, the fact that I'm even able to do this full time. I think that's lucky in a lot of choices that I've made previously in my life that led me to here. Um, but in doing my research for Rush-cremental, I understood that an incremental game needs to be simple. It needs to have a simple core idea that people can grasp onto easily. Now, looking back upon it, I think I've changed the definition of what simple really would be. It's those same exact words, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's simple to understand what a post apocalyptic world is. It's more of, I've seen one of the incremental games, I forget the name of it. I think it's not out yet. I think it's upcoming. It's about it being a bee, and basically you're building a beehive, and it's like you're collecting honey for your hive and all this stuff, and that's the number that goes up. And it's like that's a very I'd almost use a different word instead of simple. I'd go with primal. Like
Hmm.
a
Interesting.
caveman is going to know about this concept of bees make honey. And so that I think that's where simple is. And the luck that I'm talking about here is if I would have connected the dot between simple and that primal that I'm just now talking about, I think I would have done a lot better with Rush-cremental than where I'm at now.
Super interesting. So you've done some market research and maybe you're changing your opinions. If it turns out that you release this game and Rush-cremental is by far your biggest success, would that change your mind to flip back to say, well, I did the stuff. Maybe it is skill because I followed the steps, I followed the formula. Would that change your mind on it, or is it because it sounds like maybe you're seeing wish list and just kind of the initial traction, and you're like, well, maybe this isn't working.
Yeah, it could possibly change my mind. I think it would change my mind in the sense of it was a very good decision for me to have chased the market trend in a way that I did with this game. And I'm trying to do this because going straight racing games is really going hard for me right now, and I'd like to find something to increase the runway for my adventure rather than just keep decreasing it. Um, had another point there. It probably wouldn't change the mind. So where this feeling is coming from with this luck versus um, luck versus skill, it shifts into desires. Now, I wanted to make Rush-cremental, but I want to make racing games more like
Mm.
more natural racing games where you're actually actively driving. That is something that's driven in me even more than just making a game that has some racing involved in it. And during the development of Rush-cremental, especially where I went through Next Fest and it hasn't picked up the traction that I was sort of hoping it would. This has kind of got me asking personal questions, and I'm very proud of Rush-cremental, the project. I've been collaborating with someone. It's an awesome project. I've learned so much about it that I think can apply to racing games. And just from like a designer standpoint, I think I've stepped my game up. But I think it's also taught me that going forward, I think I need to lean more into the things that I want to do, because if it doesn't wind up being successful, and again, if it is, I might wind up eating all these words, but if it doesn't wind up being successful, I should be bringing the thing that I want into the world more than the thing that I think other people might want. Um, at least this is hitting me pretty hard as a creator on that front.
Okay, this is a fascinating topic because what you're kind of explaining is that you should maybe chase your passion over what maybe the market wants, but or maybe is what you're saying maybe that passion is trumping for you in this season sort of the systems that you might build around you for game dev? And here, let me just kind of get my thoughts out here. I feel like I'm stumbling around this question, but something I know about you is that before you went full time, something that you did was you woke up and you worked on your game before work for 3 hours, and 1 year you had put in over 300 days, and you had a streak of like 190 days in a row. And so when I hear that mindset, I think that is a person that is dedicated to the process and the systems, maybe even more than, because I'm sure in that much time, there were days you didn't feel like it or didn't have as much passion. And so, yeah, that makes me think of you as just a very systems oriented process person. But now you're kind of putting passion ahead. So are those two things separate, or does that all live at one time? Not a very good question there, but does that
Yeah.
spark anything for you?
Yeah. I am very process oriented as far as like, yeah, setting that morning goal of waking up at 3 a.m. and or not 3 a.m., 6 a.m. and doing 3 hours before work was it's basically I traded time that I was spending doing just watching TV before bed, and I would, stay up from like 9 to midnight, maybe a little later, either watching YouTube or TV or whatever it was, just not sleeping. And so I figured by changing my schedule to wake up at 6 a.m., now I have to go to bed at 9 p.m. I traded that time for now I'm up, I can do my game dev stuff. And the first week of that, I mean, it was pretty brutal waking up early. I'm not going to lie. But the first week of that was like, look at all the stuff I got done before 9 a.m. This is amazing. And it just drove me to keep doing that for the whole, like as long as I could. And I got into a solid habit of it to the point where it just became sort of easy for the most part, but it was still I've never been a morning person. Um, bringing that back in, I think I think the passion for racing stuff has always been there, even in that period of time. But at that period of time, I was working a full time job, and I found that this is the time that I can dedicate to my own passion of racing games. Um, I think now that I've been full time for a while, it's kind of like I'm watching my runway drizzle down and down and down. And it's like in the back of my head, I need that to go up and up and up. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go back to getting a job and trying to figure out how to do this on the side of a job again. And that took so much energy. It was so hard to do this alongside a full time job. And it's like you have a very limited amount of energy when you're working a full job, and that's why I did it the morning first, and then I went to work and did work. Every now and then after that, I would have enough energy to do something in the afternoon, but most afternoons was kinda like time to chill and then get ready for bed later and start it all over.
Yeah, so walk me into this feeling then of needing your runway to go up, which would say maybe I need to focus really on the market and maybe even abandon racing entirely versus you're sort of coming to this realization that maybe I should just make racing games anyway. So are you just embracing that maybe you might even just go back to work somewhere and follow your passion sort of in the morning again, or kind of how did you come to this conclusion?
That is yeah, so that's what Rush-cremental was giving me when I just after going through Next Fest, and it's like, I think we got 1 or 200 wish lists from Next Fest. It was really abysmal as far as I am in a fairly hot genre right now, and this is all that I've got from Next Fest. What what happened? Um, that basically prompted me on the what if this what if this doesn't succeed? Like, it's not a game that I'm super driven to make. Like, it wasn't like I found a game that I like making that is an incremental. Like, I chased the data, right? Um, and so it was kind of like, I know this is a hot genre. What can I do that's going to be my take that is I'm going to enjoy enough to actually get it done and like get the Venn diagram of the three circles and find that point. And Rush-cremental hits that point, but it's a little weak on the what I really want to do. And I think putting myself into this is projecting kind of in the future of if I was to go through a failed project and I made something that I had wanted to make completely, at least I brought that into the world. And so, yeah, maybe it failed financially or popularity wise or whatever it would be, but at least I created something that was like a root drawing from me that was like, I must do this. At least I would have won in that regard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of devs will resonate with that feeling of even if I fail, at least I'll fail making something that I'm really proud of, and that sort of sentiment. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
you're in a tough spot with the runway running out and trying to decide what to make. So yeah, hopefully Rush-cremental pops off and gives you everything you need to make whatever dream game you have. But okay, yeah, I think people will really resonate with that. Sort of tying back into that season of life where you did those 3 hours before work. I know that you also have given a lot of just shared your tips and what was working for you kind of along your YouTube journey. So for someone that's watching, and let's say they've never really dove into game dev, they've never given it a full go. Maybe they've downloaded Unity once or something, but they've never really gotten into it. What advice would you have for that person that's at the very beginning of their journey?
Um, just dive in and try. I mean, I know that's very, very vague advice, but I think like I see this on Reddit a lot. People asking, "What engine should I choose? What programming language should I choose? What type of art should I do? Should I do 2D or 3D?" I think there's enough resources out there, and this might be one of those things where I've just been making games enough that I'm blind to this, but I think there's enough resources out there that just dive into what you're making, and as soon as you find a roadblock, go ask even one of these LLM agents that can be a really smart Google and give you keywords to dive deeper into. Do not ask it to make the thing for you, in my opinion, because you're not going to learn. from that. I think using them as a tool is fine if you know what you're doing already, but it's yeah, I think it's a mixed bag for trying to learn something. Use it as a Google, a smart Google. Like, what keywords do I need to come up with for this next search? And yeah, just dive in and make something as small as you can. It's very easy to go like grandeur with our visions, especially when you don't know what scope is or how hard is it to even move a player when you don't know how to move a player? How hard is it to collect input from somebody like a keyboard or a gamepad or something when you don't know that step? Like all of these steps are giant hurdles, but just focus on one step to a time and you get there.
And what about for a game dev that they've been hobbying for a while? They know how to make stuff that's fun, but they're interested in going full time. So they're in that in between zone, like you were, where they're getting consistent, regular progress towards their games, but they'd really like to do it full time. What advice would you give that developer?
The first and foremost advice would be understand the risk involved with going full time. I think I actually did very well with that myself. In like, I understand what I'm doing with my runway, and there's a very real chance that I get to the end of it without having found success. Um, I think you need to be able to reduce the risk, understand what that risk is to be able to reduce it, and then also accept it. And when you do accept it, um, yeah, I'll come back to that if you can ask me. If once you accept the risk, there's something important there. Um, but make games alongside a full-time job or supporting yourself in another way first. Like, you don't need to be a hobby dev to be having a full-time job. You can transition yourself into this workspace outside of work is my business. And that's a mindset shift that is, I think, really important. It's what I did back in 2018, even though I had a full-time job. I shifted myself to this is not a hobby. I'm going to treat this as a business, which meant I canceled a couple projects that I was working on because they just didn't have a return on income or on investment. It was never going to give me the money back. So get rid of that, go work on something else that might. And this kind of comes back to the whole reduce your scope thing. I think small games are very good to go into this transition, but I also currently, as I've been full time for 5 years, I'm also kind of feeling like small games are possibly shooting myself in the foot too, because they're not big enough for a player base. I could be just wrong with that as well. I think there's a happy medium of the game is small, but there's depth to it. And I'm trying to learn how to do that as a designer is keep the game small in development, but add the depth so that everything is constantly evolving for a player and it kind of holds somebody longer.
Yeah. Okay. Really interesting. So let's stick with the idea of risk. We'll come back to the small game shooting yourself in the foot. So something else you talked about on your channel was just ways that you can reduce risk before you even take the leap. What are some tips you have there for someone wanting to go full time?
Building up a runway that is going to last you more than a couple games. I think that's a pretty critical step there. Um, Learning how to make games, which if you've been doing it as a hobby, that's great. Are you finishing your games and getting them to a point that you would be comfortable putting them out in public? If not, get to that step as quickly as you can, not like before going full time. You should be able to put stuff that you're comfortable asking people money for before going full time, I think. Um, I reduced my risk by working in the game industry, by going to college for game development. I then built a 5+ year runway. It's looking like it's going to be 8 years. At least I'm hoping it'll get at least 8 years. But yeah, like a 5+ year runway so you can do more than one game. Because the way I looked at it is my first game is going to flop. Going to do terrible. My second game is probably going to flop. My third game is also probably going to flop, but they're probably going up and up a little bit, is the way I always kind of envisioned it. And so doing all these things is kind of what reduced my risk overall. Work with others when, like, you might be paying somebody to do work for you, but is that cheaper than your time spent learning that thing to do it well enough? So I did the art in Accelerate. I'm not exactly an artist. I can probably make something mediocre, and I think I did really well with the stuff I did in Accelerate. But I paid somebody to make the cars, and I paid somebody to make like the things that really mattered there. Like the player's always looking at the car. This is like the key focal point. That's got to be good. Um, so I hired that bit out, and I also hired out some sound and music, even though they're all mouth sounds. I wanted to keep that vibe as like a little kid is playing with cars on their bedroom floor or whatever was kind of one of the goals with the sound design there. Um, I don't want to sit there and fine tune the sounds or learn the music or all of this other stuff. Hire that out because it reduces my risk in not spending months trying to make one little track that is mediocre.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom you just dropped there. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned you had another thought for once someone accepts the risk. So what was your thought?
This is a thought that that I'm reminding myself of. And by reminding myself of, I mean, I kind of came up with it in January and I need to keep reminding myself of it. Once you have accepted the risk and once you have said you're going full time and you are now in the seat that I'm in, I think it's really important to remember that you've accepted that. And you can always change your mind, right? There can be life changes. Life goes in ways that we don't know. So you can always change your mind. And I think that's something good. But what's the word I'm looking for? There's a specific word here. You really should basically disillusion yourself into believing you can't fail. Like nothing you can do, not saying that you can't fail as in be successful, but like you got to be so disillusioned that you're actually going to find success in what you're doing that you believe it to the point of putting that effort into it. And I think that's something I've learned with Rush-cremental as well is like go all in, all in. That's what's going to make the game really shine. It's one thing to scratch the surface, but you gotta. I'm so glad we had this talk today because I needed to remind myself of this whole thing. Like,
Good.
um, once you've accepted the risk, once you understand the risks and you've accepted them, you've got to just disillusion is not the word. There is a better word for this, but it's like
Yeah,
you just got to.
another guest I said that he strives to have a relentless optimism. Is that sort of the energy you're looking for, or is this something different?
I think it's something slightly different. It's got to be. It's like you've lost your mind, basically, and you've got to accept that. Yeah, I really wish I had better words to put into that one right now, but that's the best I can do for this feeling. You've just got to accept that you're completely disillusioned in you are going to succeed at what you're doing, but full self-confidence and belief into it because that's what's going to create something much better than if you just go in with a half foot in, half foot out. I think that's been a big part of my problem in the last couple of years is I'm half foot in, half foot out with these prototypes. And I just don't like dive all the way in. And that's the only way to get through something, I think.
Yeah, what does it look like to be all in? Like you mentioned, you feel like you're all in with Rush-cremental. Is it just the mindset of like I'm finishing this no matter what, or what is that different in the prototypes you've done where you feel like you were half in, half out?
Yeah, it's basically I'm finishing this game no matter what. The reason behind the 100-day challenge, it was initially supposed to be 100 days from start to release, including marketing and everything. And I kind of blocked out certain budgets, but the scope of the project and the quality bar, they always rise up and, those things always slide. So the reason for the 100 days of development was I didn't want to be crunched by 100 days of calendar time, but I also didn't want the project to be like going on forever. and I was confident that I could hit that scope within 100 days. So it was kind of like 100 days is not enough, is not so much time that you can relax, because there really isn't much relaxing. It's not, like I said, 10 days was on this one problem. And I basically just had to come to the point of that's it, the end. Can't get what I want here. We just answer it this way and move on. It forces you to make those decisions, it gives you a deadline in a sense. Maybe not a this is the date deadline, but you have 100 days that you can work on this. And every day I work on it, I mark one off. And so it gives you it gives you a challenge, a goal. And I think those are really important.
Yeah, I love that challenge that you set out for yourself. And I think this is a good time to also transition a little bit to talk about you and how you've been spending this 100-day challenge. And I noticed that you are pretty active on Twitch. Have you been streaming the whole challenge on Twitch, or how has that been working?
Yeah, I've streamed the entire challenge. I've actually been streaming since those 3 hour mornings, um, way back in, I don't know, like 8 years ago. Yeah, we came up with the 100-day challenge live on Twitch. We did the market research for incremental games. We did all the play tests of them. We did, I don't know, I think we came up with 10 different incremental game ideas that would be within something that I wanted to do. And then I wound up finding somebody to collaborate with and um, discussing it with them. I think we added an 11th and we wound up going with the 11th, which was kind of a combination of a couple of them, but it was an interesting process. We definitely did not go with I say we, it's both mostly me, myself, and I as the we in the deciding factor. But Twitch chat does come in and come up with some ideas, and those ideas do spark more ideas in me. And so you could also kind of say the we is me and chat. Um, but it's, yeah, so those ideas just like spark, and we came up with multiple ideas in order to find the one that would more likely resonate with other people and be the one that wants to be worked on rather than just, this is the first one, let's go.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that you had been streaming that long, actually. Like I said, I was much more familiar with your YouTube channel, but clearly, yeah, you've shifted much more to Twitch. I noticed only a couple YouTube videos over the past couple years. So what about it? Why Twitch over YouTube more? What about Twitch is appealing to you?
Twitch is appealing to me in the sense of I get to share and help other developers, possibly motivate and inspire others to start their own stuff. I do try to inspire as much as I can. It's sometimes hard when I'm having I'm showing it as it is. I I do my day in and day out, which means it's the goods and the bads. Um and it keeps me focused in a way that not being on Twitch does. I wish YouTube streaming was a little smoother of a process. I've tried it a couple times and I will probably try it again in the future. It's just YouTube doesn't really show streams unless you really go looking for them. Like people have to
Hmm,
dive in and really find them to
interesting.
get there. Whereas Twitch is streaming first, although I don't think new people are finding me on Twitch with natural growth. At least not in the last couple of years. I think that's sort of stagnated a little bit too. Um, I really want to get back into making YouTube videos. I loved the process and I loved reaching more people that way as far as sharing the lessons I've learned. And I like giving back to developers. It's really important to me is like I've got some experience. I've might not have got a successful game out there, but I definitely know about the game development process and a bunch of other things within the industry, right? Um, so I know I can help others start their own adventure or get inspired to make their own game, maybe even make their first game, who knows. Um, but YouTube videos are a lot harder they take so much effort. Like the quality bar is not just turn the live stream on and talk. You got to come up with like quick cuts and you have to be to the point, which for me requires writing a script, making the script actually to the point, and then shooting the video and everything, and then hoping it comes out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I'm much less familiar with Twitch. Do you feel like it's a good sort of marketing thing for game devs, or for you, is it more just about the community and kind of the focus and things it provides on that end?
So as far as being a developer on Twitch and like streaming my development process, I don't really think of that as a good marketing outlet. It does tend towards getting an initial seed for an audience. So I wouldn't say it's absolutely zero, but it's also talking to and discussing with other developers what you're doing more than trying to reach players. I think that is why I would say no on the marketing front um, there. But it does. I do think using Twitch to like contact streamers and other people that play certain types of games similar to yours, I think that would work as a marketing strategy. It was working actually quite well for the original Accelerate back when.
Okay, yeah, cool. And then kind of shifting into a little bit of a marketing and sort of business conversation, is Accelerate your most successful game that you've had?
Yes. The
Okay.
original one was the most successful one too. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and are you willing to share any numbers or stats about Accelerate and kind of give us a little context?
absolutely. So I would guess the best best one would be the amount of money I've made from Accelerate. It's probably the most common question, and that is the original Accelerate got me $6,250. That is not the gross figure. That is after the taxes that Steam takes out. That's after the Steam cut. That's um, before paying any help, contracts, assets, tools. That's the money that actually hit my bank account. Um, it is, of course, pre my own income tax, whatever that wound up being. But I think this is the number that is the most important because it's the number that actually came in to my business rather than I could say a more substantial number. I probably made $10,000 if you look at the gross figure, but that's not what I got.
Yeah.
um, the franchise in total has made just under 9,000. So fair bit went to the original.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then something I was curious to ask you, because I know that it didn't blow up like a mega hit, but the games industry, especially for indies, is considered a hit-driven industry a lot. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's a way to string together smaller successes and be successful that way?
Um, that's an interesting one. I think I'm at a crossroads with this. I would say for most of my career, and especially being a full-time indie, I have been trying to go with the sustained smaller hits rather than trying to chase something viral. Based on the fact that Accelerate went bigger than I was anticipating, or I mean, it didn't go huge, but it it succeeded my expectations is really what wound up happening. I was thinking I'd make maybe $1,000 and I've got more than 6,000. Um, so from that perspective, it might actually be a little bit more hit driven in the sense of we don't control what audiences want. And I don't think there's really good ways to know. Like the Mecha Chameleon game is hide and seek. It's one of those primal simplicity things that I was going on about. Like it's hide and seek and it just exploded. But if you would have told anybody literally the day before it came out and got popular to go make a game about hide and seek, everyone would have looked at you and been like, yeah, right. So I don't really, I think viral hits just happen and I would not necessarily shy away from one happening to me, but I don't think you can aim at making them happen.
Yeah, especially for those super viral games like a Mecha Chameleon, it feels like there are elements at play of just timing and the right person finding it to hit that level of success. I think it would be hard to argue that there's no luck in that. So that makes a lot of sense. Are you hoping that Rush-cremental will be your most financially successful game? And I know you mentioned that the wish list signals are not very good. So how are you feeling that the odds of that happening?
I'm really hoping the marketing push that's going to happen in August and everything is going to twist both the wish lists and everything else around. It is still a fairly hot genre in Steam as far as I can tell, and I think that it delivers exactly what I got out of playing a whole bunch of them, which was that super zen relaxing mode. Um, I definitely hope it's gonna be the most profitable so far. Actually, I hope it's gonna be profitable. Let's go with that. So far, none of my games have been profitable. Let's be honest with everybody. But that is part of the industry, I think, and something that you have to accept as a risk of doing this full time is just because you make a game, and even just because you make a good game, whatever that's supposed to mean, um, doesn't mean it's going to sell copies. I kind of wish I was as passionate about um, mowing lawns or shoveling snow as I was about
Yeah.
game dev, because I feel
Yeah.
like those are so much easier to sell. It's like you have snow on your deck. I can remove it for a $20 bill. Let's go. Like clear indicator of this is what I did, and money came my way. Of course, games have something that can't have. You can scale to unfathomable scales without doing another thing beyond having pressed the release button.
Yeah, well, speaking of, kind of your hopes and dreams, this has been such a lovely chat, Tim. I've really appreciated your time, but I would love to leave you with a final question here. So, this is the Dev Dream podcast, and I created it to inspire mostly myself by hearing about all the cool things other developers have been going on, but also others. And I always find it inspiring to hear about the dreams of other developers. So, for you, Tim, what would you say is your game dev dream in this season of life?
I'm almost living my game dev dream. I'm like 90% there. So my dream is to continue doing exactly what I'm doing, but not have to worry about money. Whether that means one of my games absolutely just takes off and funds the rest of my life doing it, or whether that means I make several games and they all chip in to do this, or whether that means even somebody just comes in and is like, here's, you don't have to worry about this ever again. Um, I think that is the direction my dream goes in. And it also kind of drives into like, yes, I want the funds to fund me, so I don't have to worry about that. But I'd like enough funds to be able to collaborate with other developers and not necessarily like just one person forever, but like to just collaborate with a bunch of other developers and see what gets created with more people. Because I think that's the way forward for game development is work with others.
Well, Tim, that's a fantastic dream. I hope you're able to make it a reality. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.